I like that you have your like referee shirt on.
Yes.
Not that, I mean, you're a coach, but like it's reminiscent of a referee.
It does, right?
Just because it's black and white stripes.
Yeah.
I saw it in the closet today. Yeah, I was going to wear a jersey, and then I was like, nah, because I'm going out after. I need to wear a real shirt. And then I said, well, this is probably close enough.
And you wouldn't have time for a quick switch of shirt? You're running
No, but
right
I mean, I just don't want to... I don't want to dirty another shirt, you know? I hate dirtying extra shirts.
God.
He's actually going to take the last leg of this discussion in the car
Yeah.
on the way to wherever he needs to go.
Yeah, hopefully, if that's okay with you guys.
That's so funny. What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not
It sounds
make
so
this shit
stupid
up.
hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time. Are we ready? Do we just get into it? Oh my
I'm
God.
ready. How do we start this
I think
thing?
so. I'm pulling
Yeah,
up
how
my
do
notes.
we start a show?
God, it's been so long.
And this time we mean it. Okay.
So where have we been? Maybe we started that way.
I mean, I think we should still start with welcome to the feature length podcast.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you go ahead.
Cool. So, welcome back to the Feature Length Podcast, a podcast where we talk about movie and TV shows for a feature length of time, in case you've forgotten, because it's been so long. But you're hearing today your hosts, me, Karolina, and
I don't know who you're pointing at
yeah,
because it's different
I
on
realized
everyone's
that.
screen.
How about Marco? What do you sound like?
Hi, I'm Marco. Hey, how's it going, everyone?
And I'm Dan.
Perfect.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
What's up, everyone? What's up, guys?
So we have a podcast. It's been months, I think, since you've heard from us.
It's been a feature length of time, at least.
A few feature lengths, a few 3.5 hour Martin Scorsese lengths of time.
Yeah.
But we missed doing this. We just all have had some life craziness, I guess, is our excuse.
There's been a few updates.
I started working in the film industry, which is like 70-hour at least work week. So believe it or not, I was not having any time to watch or discuss content with the pals. Yeah, Dan moved.
Sad.
Lots of stuff has been happening.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned that on the Lost one, but between the Lost episode and this one, I also got a new job. I'm working in a warehouse now in the shipping department, and it is keeping me extremely busy. So yeah, it's nice to finally get back at this. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I'm just talking with two friends, but it is nice to get back at this
Yeah.
after months and continue the selection series we started 3 months ago.
Yeah. Which we'll probably finish by the next time there's a selection series.
The end of this
Yeah,
year.
yeah. This entire year is just the selection series. Yeah, I don't really have an excuse. I mean, really, you guys are the busy ones. I am busy, but, you know, no major life changes, except for one fun thing that we'll talk about later when we talk about the episode. But, yeah, same old, planning a wedding, working, you know, busy times.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's getting ever closer.
It is. We're officially, this month is 1 year we'll be engaged, which is pretty crazy.
Wow, has it been 1
Yeah,
year
it was
already?
July. It was
Wow.
July last year. And then, yeah, and we're like a year and 4 months out from the wedding day. So, you know, just
Exciting.
lots of planning happening, emailing DJs. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, I will say we have a shared like podcast email account, and when I signed into our drive, it showed me like recently opened documents, and one of them was like a
Okay.
DJ thing, and I was like, I think this was Marco.
Was it
I don't know.
actually?
Yes, it must have been you. I don't know how it ended up.
Oh, it must have
Maybe
been.
we're
But how did
signed
it-
into
yeah,
the
that's so
feature length
weird.
account.
Maybe.
Because we have an email
Maybe.
account if anyone wants to email us about anything. I don't know what you would possibly want to send us an email about.
Have we ever checked that email? Maybe people have emailed us.
I check it, and then no one has.
Okay. Fantastic. Email in your questions, everyone.
No one has just been emailing us asking us where we've been. Surprisingly, no
Yeah.
one has asked. That's so weird. Our hundreds and
Surprisingly.
just
Yeah,
hundreds,
surprisingly.
maybe sometimes, of listeners have not been chomping at the bit.
Funny because like I do run into people. I won't say names. I'll tell you guys after. But like, there's one person who we went to high school with, who I run into.
I feel like that's how every story starts that we tell them.
Yeah, who I run into because like a mutual friend of ours does like music stuff, and sometimes I go watch those music shows, and this guy's normally there, and he's always so complimentary about the podcast. But the last time I ran into him, like it had been months since we released anything, and he was like, "So are you still doing that thing?"
Aw.
And I was like,
Oh.
"Oh, it's gonna happen, buddy. Just we're prepping, we're doing the prep work." But
Yeah. We need to make sure, because we don't do this for every episode, but we need to make sure and post this one on our Instagram account
Yeah.
just to like
for sure.
help the notification system with
Yeah,
this
our
one.
grand
Yeah,
return.
definitely.
Everyone needs
Yeah.
to know about
Yeah.
it.
Everybody needs to know we're back, baby.
But I guess speaking of, our last episode was Lost, unless the Vanderpump came out after. I've
No,
already
it was
lost the
Lost.
plot.
It was
Okay,
Lost.
Nope.
so that was the first episode of
You
our.
lost the plot.
That was the first episode of our selection series. That was Dan's selection show. So this week we're talking about my selection, which is Ted Lasso. I know everyone would have guessed this because I love sports. Obviously, I talk about sports nonstop on the pod. So
I'm gonna be honest, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. When we were discussing like what our choices for the selection episode series would be for these shows, like that one felt like way out of left field.
It blew
no
me
pun
away.
intended.
It literally, I was like, of all the shows.
But I was down for it.
Yeah.
Like, it was surprising.
I love to surprise people. I mean, it would have been Fleabag, but we've already discussed that.
Yeah.
And also,
True.
you two picked really long shows, so I was trying to be gracious and
Sorry.
give you guys a bit
You know-
less to watch.
I feel bad because I really want to switch mine, but it's fine. You guys have already watched all of it, so it's okay. We'll talk
Switch
about
it to what?
To the bear, but it's fine. We can
Oh,
talk about
well,
the bear
we-
regardless.
Yeah. I mean, we can also.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know at what rate we'll get to it, but we can also do this again because I do have other shows I would love to discuss with you guys,
Yeah.
whether in a selection
For
or
sure.
just in general. Maybe we'll have a year
Yeah.
of shows next year. I don't know. We'll see. Too far away to plan.
This year, let's just do it this year because Vanderpump is already a
True.
TV show. That's all we've released. So
Do you guys hear bagpipes? I think there's bagpipes outside my window. Is that picking
I
up?
don't
I can't
hear
tell.
bagpipes.
No, but there's always some interesting noises coming out from Carol's
There's
window.
definitely very
Yeah.
loud bagpipes, but I
Comes in
don't
the
know if
episode.
they're gonna come up in the recording. So sorry in
That's
advance
fine.
if that's distracting.
I've grown to appreciate it. I've grown to appreciate it as like city ambience. Like sometimes
Yeah.
a good example is our Spider-Man episode where there was a lot of like street traffic
Yeah.
for that one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you were living in the same place you are now, maybe not. But like it kind of felt at the beginning of the episode like we were sitting in a cafe recording because of the noise. Like it was cool.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring the ambiance always. Just the craziness of one of the busiest streets in Ottawa.
yeah, you're not kidding.
Yeah, and it's a Saturday afternoon, so everything's happening. But back to our intro. We're talking about Ted Lasso today, my obvious choice. And I think because we chose these selections, obviously, over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I think it was really a really long time ago.
Probably almost 2 years ago.
So I feel like this was maybe right after Ted Lasso had finished when I chose it, and that's why it was
sounds
front
right.
of mind for me. Because in case you couldn't tell, it was being sarcastic. I don't really care about sports at all,
I don't either.
but we'll get into it more. It's obviously the heart of the show that I appreciate, and the sports are kind of secondary Although that has slightly changed because I also am currently watching Welcome to Wrexham, so I feel like I'm a huge football fan.
Oh,
Yeah.
you got a shout out.
Yeah.
We converted
At
you.
one point.
But in case anyone doesn't know, Ted Lasso is a show about an American football, the one where they toss the pigskin around, or however you want to separate the two. People don't say that anymore. So he was an American football coach who was hired to coach.
I'm pretty sure people haven't said that for like 200 years.
Yeah, that's a very dated reference, but it's all good.
Okay, that's fine. But so an American football coach is hired by a Premier League English football, aka soccer in like North America where we live, soccer club, to coach them kind of as a fuck you by the owner's ex-wife. And then shenanigans ensue. That's kind of the whole show. It's all about this guy who is like has a heart of gold and means well, but is like an idiot who knows nothing about soccer. And it's just his whole journey with like coaching this team and getting to know the players and joining this like new community of this town in England called Richmond, which exists, but the football club doesn't, obviously, if you know anything about football clubs, which I didn't. I genuinely was like, I don't know, it could be real. When I first started watching, I don't know anything.
Well, there's some interesting stuff to talk about in terms of the way it blends with real life reality. So we'll talk about it.
Fun. But yeah, that's the show. It lasted for 3 seasons. It was on Apple Plus. I think it's like their most streamed show ever. I still don't have Apple Plus because, no offense, one show is not going to get me to get a streaming service. Sorry, Apple. But I found other ways to watch it, and I love it, and I loved the characters, and I loved all the relationships between the characters. If anyone has been listening to this for a long time, they know that that's kind of all I care about when I watch anything, really. So that's why this show was my selection for the selection series. So I don't know if Marco or Dan want to talk about your first thoughts when you were watching it, because obviously neither of you had seen it before, but it had been on your list forever, and you were just getting around to it, and I forced you to watch it.
Correct. That's what this podcast is at its best.
Yeah.
Is forcing each other to watch stuff that's on our list, but we just don't prioritize.
Do you think either of you would have ever watched Lost if I had
I would have.
you like sit down and watch 6 seasons of Lost?
No.
I would have.
Would you have actually? Or
It was on my list. It might have been in like a decade or something, but I do think I would have gotten around to it. It's just like it has so much lore, and because I never knew the ending, like I had to find out, and I wasn't gonna Google it.
Yeah, I think the better question is like, I probably would have started it. I don't know if I would have finished it. I think I would have like.
That's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Would you have ever finished Lost?
I don't think so. I think it would have just been one of those shows that midway through a season, I stopped watching for like a week, and then I was like, I'm never coming back to that. So I'm glad that we did it.
I haven't done that with anything but Breaking Bad, and even that, I still am convinced I'm going to finish at some point.
Wild.
That is wild. That's the craziest take.
Yeah, so I think I would have finished
one show
Lost
to
at
do
some
that.
point.
How do you feel that you watched Lost before Breaking Bad? That's crazy.
I liked Lost, guys.
I'm like the biggest fan of Lost you could possibly meet, and even I would finish Breaking Bad a million times before finishing Lost.
Yeah.
But haven't you watched
100%.
Lost like 3 times this year already?
Yeah. No, not this year.
Come on.
How many times have you watched Breaking Bad?
Probably like 5 in my life.
Yeah.
So more than Lost still, but I think I've watched Lost like 4 times, which just lock me up at this point.
I think one of you guys is just going to need to suggest a Breaking Bad episode, and that's going to force me to watch it all.
Yeah. But it can't be a selection episode because like we all are too attached to it.
Yeah, that's
It's like Lord of the Rings.
Two of us are too attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, you have some attachment to it. You dropped out of it halfway through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an attachment.
You
Yeah.
did watch half of it.
A detachment, almost.
Sure. But Marco, do you care who goes first?
No, I don't care. You can go first.
Okay. I'll go first, and then you can wrap it up because you have more of a knowledge of soccer, I guess.
Yeah, I think mine will be less show related and more like interesting stuff related about soccer. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so Carol, you mentioned how it was on our lists, and it was, I can confirm definitely for me because also our friend Miguel, who coincidentally was on the Lost episode, he could have actually even, like, he had enough knowledge to probably even be on this episode. He recommended this show to me multiple times as well. So yeah, like I said, I was happy when I heard that you were picking this one, because I was like, yes, finally an excuse to watch it. And I liked it. I will say I liked it. I don't know if I loved it, for details I'll get into later. There was just a couple character beats that kind of bothered me. But the biggest takeaway for me for the show was how genuinely wholesome and enjoyable a character Ted Lasso is. I think they really nailed, especially Jason Sudeikis' performance, like really kind of hit the ball out of the park, no pun intended. Wrong sport, but still.
Sports is sports.
I like, my biggest enjoyment of the show definitely came from him and his character, and I think despite my relatively small problems with the show, I wouldn't rule it out as like rewatching the show in the future, or at least parts of it. Like it is the most modern of the 3 shows we're going to talk about with this selection series, so it is also the shortest, and I do think that adds a lot of rewatchability to it versus the other 2 shows that we have talked about / will talk about with our first and last episode. So I'll leave it there for now. Like I said, I do have a few issues I want to bring up, but generally, it was an enjoyable time overall.
Nice. I will say this was also a show that was on my list for all the same reasons. Carol had recommended it. Miguel had recommended it. Podcast I listened to had recommended it. And also it's a show about soccer. And I so this is probably a good time to say, like, I am a big soccer fan. It's the only sport that I'm, like, truly a fan of, to the point that, like, I actually played growing up and have been involved in, et cetera, et cetera. So it was something I always wanted to get around to. I was weirdly reluctant to get around to it, for a fun fact that I'll share later, because this is just an introduction right now. I was kind of putting it off for a very specific reason. So I was also glad when Carol was like, let's watch it. And I was like, okay, fine. We'll do it. Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. Like, there's a part... I would say I love the first season of the show, and I liked season 2 and 3. But as the show went on, there was stuff that I kind of liked less and less, which is ironic because that's when they had, like, more time to do stuff. But I kind of felt like the first season worked a little bit better for me. But regardless, I everything you've said I totally agree with. Very enjoyable, probably something I'll go back to and rewatch. And also just hit at the perfect time for me, because I was, like, having played soccer up into a certain point and then stopped, and still watched, like, the Premier League. I do support a Premier League team, which is Manchester United, who I've watched my whole life, and I still watch them. But I was, like, I was thinking about maybe getting back into doing something related to soccer, and then this show was just kind of like the final push, where I was like, okay, fuck it, I'm going to coach a soccer team this year. So I am also coaching a soccer team this summer, which is the fun thing about why I've been a little bit more busy this summer as well. So shout out to the show.
Real life Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Yeah, but and I will say maybe, like, a couple of other things. I am a little bit... It is one of those shows where people say, oh, like, even if you don't like soccer, you could like the show. Which I guess is true, because people that don't like soccer do like the show, so that is just a proven fact. But as somebody that likes soccer, I am also very surprised that people that don't like soccer like the show. It reminds me a lot of Queen's Gambit in that way, where when I was watching Queen's Gambit, I was like, there's a lot of fucking chess in this. Like, if you don't like chess, like, I don't know how you would watch the show and get something out of it, but, like, people did. And that's kind of how I feel about this, where I was shocked the level of, like, detail they were talking about soccer stuff. And I was like, damn, but okay, I guess people like it. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where if you're not, like, as close to it, I don't know. I can't explain it. But anyway, I'm glad, and I do stand by that, I guess. If you don't like soccer, I would still give the show a try. People do really like it for the characters. But just kind of surprising to me, because there is also a lot of soccer in the show, which is, I wasn't expecting. I thought it would be very hands-off with the soccer stuff, and way more just like, yeah, it's just like whatever.
Soccer is hands-off.
Well, it is. Very true, very true. But yeah, there's, like, if you do like soccer, there's also a lot of really fun, like, inside soccer references and things in this show too, which we'll talk about as well. So I think anybody could get something out of it.
Yeah, as a person who doesn't like soccer, I find that obviously I followed the, like, who is winning, who is losing, and that's kind of it. Like, all of the technicalities that they ever got into, I was just kind of like, okay, tell me how this affects the characters that I care about, and that's kind of what I'm here for. Everything else was like went right over my head and like seemed secondary and or unimportant. But also, I will say, if you don't know anything about soccer, they do explain things, obviously, because Ted is a character who doesn't know anything about soccer either. So that helped partially why it works. Yeah. So they have to explain things to him, and then the audience also gets it. So that's a part of the genius. And we can talk about, maybe to structure it, I guess, some of the characters. We can talk about all of them and then our favorites. And starting with Ted Lasso, I assume you guys know this, but I don't know. The character was actually created in 2013 to promote that NBC Sports was starting to cover Premier League. So Jason Sudeikis created this character of Ted Lasso, but he was more like arrogant and kind of an asshole. But when they decided to revisit it for the show, because of the political climate of the United States at the time, they decided to make it a more sympathetic character. And Jason Sudeikis was quoted as to like why he made that choice, and he said, "It was the culture we were living in. I'm not terribly active online," which like flex, but it even affected me. And then you have Donald Trump coming down the escalator, and I was like, okay, this is silly. And then what he unlocked in people. I hated how people weren't listening to one another. Things became very binary, and I don't think that's the way the world works. And just as a new parent, I was like, boy, I don't want to add to this. I don't want to portray it. Because the original character was kind of like, probably would have been a racist kind of vibe.
Right.
So they didn't really want to have a whole show about that kind of character.
He's a bit of a nationalist.
Yeah. The way some sports fans cannot always be the nicest people. Wide spectrum of people watch sports, and they're not always the greatest human beings. So I'm obviously, if they didn't make that choice, I wouldn't have liked the show. So smart on their part.
It is a smart choice. It is a smart choice.
Yeah.
That also puts to bed a rumor that I could have just looked up online at any point, but that like I was unsure if like maybe it was an SNL character originally or something, because obviously Jason Sudeikis like comes from SNL, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it does very much seem like one of those in the group of movies that could have like stemmed from like being an SNL skit evolving into a movie or show.
For sure.
So I wasn't sure, but still a separate TV reference, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's just because he was on SNL. Everything he does kind of has an SNL-y vibe. Like, it almost always feels just like a drawn-out skit. Because even in the rest of my research, because the theme song is done by Marcus Mumford from Mumford & Sons, because Marcus and Jason are good friends. So in the research, I found out that Jason was in one of their music videos, so then I went to watch it. And it wasn't just Jason. It was Jason Sudeikis, Ed Helms, I literally just wrote this down, Will Forte, and Jason, what's one from Arrested Development? Bateman. So it was all four of them, and the whole music video kind of just felt like an SNL sketch. So I just think that's what they do. That's the genre of comedy.
Nice. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so outside of Ted Lasso, some other important characters, in case you haven't watched the show, are Rebecca, who is the current owner of AFC Richmond, the football club that hires him. Her ex-husband's name is Rupert. He is just like a rich, cheating asshole character who used to own the club, but when they divorced, she got it in the divorce, I guess, is what happened. I don't entirely remember the details of that, but he sticks around throughout the show just to ruin her life for a little bit. And she spends the whole season trying to get back at him for ruining her life. And also on the coaching staff, there is Coach Beard, who is like Ted's best friend, who he brings with him from the States, who is, we'll get into it more, I'm sure, but one of the craziest characters. You never know what he's going to do or say, don't know his history. So fun shenanigans from him, definitely. There's also Higgins, who works for the football club, who has a few different titles throughout the show. I don't even know what his title is at the end because I don't know anything about football, but some kind of higher up position. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. Some type of
I think he's
assistant,
like the assistant manager.
Yeah,
Something like
sort
that.
of,
Yeah,
like-
definitely not a coach, but kind of
No.
running things behind the scenes. There's also Nate, who starts out as a kit man, but eventually joins the coaching staff.
I have things to talk about. Nate
Yeah.
I have things to
after.
talk about. Nate.
Yeah, Nate has an arc for sure.
Yeah.
And then some players that they focus on, because obviously there's a whole team, but we don't really get to know all of them. But some of the big names are Roy Kent, Jamie Tart, Sam Obisanya, Colin something, Davies, I don't know.
Yeah, something.
Danny, who joins, I think, mid-season 1.
Yeah.
And Isaac, who is the team captain by the end of the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like Zorro they kind of talk about because he changes his name a bunch and breaks his nose and also shenanigans. And then another character of note is Keely, who is just at the beginning dating Jamie, but then eventually starts working for the club in like a PR sense. And she has her own kind of arc through the show as well. I think that's the most important people to discuss.
Yeah, that's the main cast.
Ted has like a wife and son, but they're in America, and you know, I don't think they're that
And he's
important.
sad about them.
He's sad about them, but they don't really play much. They visit like twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the cast of characters.
I want to jump, just because you mentioned the wife and son. I just want to talk about this very quickly. But I did find it incredibly, like, painful to watch in that way where it's like, oh, I probably shouldn't be watching this because it's, like, to know the divorce situation that happened between Jason Sudeikis and Olivia Wilde.
Yeah.
Like, in real life, and to know that he was, like, writing this show, at least, like, the first season of it, like, probably as behind the scenes that was happening, because
Yeah.
I think they got divorced in between seasons.
Yeah.
But, like, the writing was
That
probably
makes a
on the
lot of
wall.
sense.
So, like, knowing that context and watching it was, like, even sadder watching that whole thing play out. I'm like, yeah, I don't feel like I should be watching this right now. This feels, like, very personal.
I'm glad that wasn't in my mind. and
Yeah.
that wasn't contributing to my watch, but that makes total sense.
Well, no, he said in the show, like, Ted runs away to England to deal with his divorce, and he's like, I guess I did the same thing, because we filmed in England, so I also literally went to a different continent to get space and deal with the divorce. Yeah. So it was definitely probably hard for him parallel.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most
Because he was writing it and acting it, so kudos to him. Strong man.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on with, like, some of the side characters, I feel like something the show does a really good job of, in general, is you guys talked about not necessarily being big sports fans, right? And, like, I feel like a lot of people, you guys included, that say, like, that talk about not being big sports fans. At the same time, though, you'll also talk about, like, a lot of the experiences surrounding sports. So, like, Dan, you've talked about how you don't give a shit about baseball, but, like, you'll love going to watch a baseball game in person or something like that.
Yeah, like just being in the stadium is cool.
And I feel like a lot of the side characters in the town do a really good job of showcasing the way, like, in Europe, that towns can be, like, built around a soccer team, and, like, the local pubs that everybody gets together to watch the game at and all that kind of stuff. It was a nice little bit of, like, color for the show to be able to cut away to that and watch the towns, like, love and hate and support and et cetera, as the show is going on. That just made it feel very real in terms of the way that, like, sporting can be, like, a super positive community. It can be a super negative community. Like, you have all the ups and downs of all of it. But regardless, it just felt, that part of the show felt super real to me, and was a nice touch, because it was something they didn't really have to do necessarily. They could have just focused on the main characters. So to take that time to always, like, showcase what's going on in the town was a really nice touch, I think.
Yeah, and, like, just to bridge off that quickly is, like, and also connecting to something you, Carol, said earlier, was, like, how that affects and enhances the character work. Like, you really feel, regardless of your knowledge of sports, when the stakes are high, like, sports-wise, it also means plot-wise, and then thus character-wise as well. Like, it really, like, Ted going through what he's going through, and, like, for him to be able to win, or, I guess, spoiler alert, but, like, whether win or lose, but, like, get as far as they could, like, that he really needs that to prove to himself that what he's doing for the team is making like that difference, so that he can sort of make up for like everything he's been through. So it all stems back to the character work, and I think that's why it's so easy for just the general viewer to get into it, like me and Carol, who don't really have an attachment to sports.
Totally.
Yeah, and I know there's been sports shows before, obviously. I don't know that I've watched any of them, but like one that comes to mind is like Friday Night Lights. So obviously people have realized that you can use kind of the structure of a sport or a tournament or something to help navigate like a plot line throughout a series and like kind of match the ups and downs to it. So like this isn't novel in that way, but it definitely does kind of help to have almost at all times like two fronts to be paying attention to, because like obviously everyone has lives, even people who play sports, so we're paying attention to what's going on in their personal lives in the world of a show, but also because people care about the outcome of sports games, that is also something that we pay attention to. It's really interesting because I feel like in the first season, like Ted keeps saying, I don't really care if we win or lose, and I, as a person who doesn't follow sports a lot, I also am kind of that mentality. But obviously when their livelihood is winning or losing sports, you can't really be that kind of person. So you have to start caring a little bit.
Right. I think one of the things that, because you're right, like there are obviously so many, not just shows, but movies or particular episodes of a show, whatever, that do a whole, like a sport arc and et cetera, and I tend to find that stuff like really fucking boring, even as someone that does care about sports. But whenever it's like the football movie about just a bunch of young guys in high school and they're what are they going through, and are they going to win the big championship and go play college football, like I literally hate that genre of movie so much.
Especially high school, because it's like,
yeah, it's so frustrating. And I think the nice thing about what Ted Lasso did was, as we talked about, is like it's the positivity aspect and really showcasing, and like as much as it did get technical in some aspects of soccer, really showcasing the positive aspects of like realistic interpretations of what it is like to be on a team, and in this case like a literal sports team, but it could be applied to like any work scenario or whatever, just working together with a group of people to try to accomplish something. One of the things I talked about when we watched, because we actually all watched the pilot episode together over fucking Christmas break 6 months ago. We watched it together, and I had mentioned that the show in a very yin-yang way kind of felt like the other side of the bear, because both shows are about like a group of people coming together to try to achieve something, but one is like hyper intense and stressful and the other one is like a super happy positive vibe. But I think it just goes to show, like, if you really focus on like the community aspect and those like inner relationships and how it affects the larger community of whether it's Chicago or this fucking town in England, when you focus on that stuff, it takes away the need for the specifics. Whereas like whether or not a fucking high school team wins or loses a sporting game and these kids are going to get scholarships to go somewhere, like that just, it truly, like I could not care less about that in any way.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key difference is, like we've said, like for decades now, sports movies, that's been a genre. But like the key difference is whether or not the stakes and plot are all about the win in like said sports game at the end of the movie, or if that's just in support of like the actual plot and characters. And this came out doing it the right way, where it was just a reason to get the plot and characters where they need to be at the end. So that's why I was engaged with it as much as I was.
We'll get back to the characters in a second, but I wanted to note that because I've watched the show I think like twice now, on my recent rewatch, I forgot that at the end of the first season they got relegated. Like that's how little, like obviously the ups and downs matter, but like that's how little that it actually factors into the plot. Like I guess because it is 3 seasons and there was like a relegation and then they moved back up and, you know, back to the status quo, nothing really changed, but yeah, I just forgot. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that did happen. That sucks. And now that I learned a bit more about what that really means by watching Wrexham, that's the only sports I'm ever going to get into, guys. But now that I know a bit more about what that means, I'm like, oh, that's like a huge deal. Like if I watched this after watching Wrexham, I probably would have remembered that they got relegated. But as a person who knows nothing about sports, I was like, yeah, that sucks, but whatever. Who cares?
Yeah. No, it really sucks for like whatever, and it always happens to like teams that are like from smaller communities and stuff where they don't really have the money to constantly develop and be in like the top tier league and stuff, and it really fucking sucks. It is literally like you listen to like podcasts and stuff and they talk about it and the way that, like the team just gets dismantled and people leave and what it does to the town, and it's just like, yeah, it's brutal. It's a brutal thing. And you're right, the show is just kind of like, we got relegated.
Yeah.
All right.
It wasn't a huge part of the plot.
And like nobody leaves the team, nobody gets fired.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, everything's fine. We're just gonna work our way back up. That was a little bit unrealistic to what that team would have been dismantled.
Well, technically Jamie left and then came back.
Yeah, which I guess is very. I mean, him coming back is not realistic, but him leaving was
that was
very
personal
fitting.
issue related.
And
but,
Roy.
Yeah.
I mean, Roy retired.
Yes.
So like he probably would have left either way, but still, they lost like their two.
That's true, actually.
Most notable players.
That is true. Everyone else is pretty young on the team.
Yeah, but they also weren't like it's because we were relegated that this happened. So I was just like, whatever. It's what happens. But so characters.
Yeah. Was that not the reason Jamie left?
Well, because he was only there on loan.
I'm trying to remember now.
So
yeah,
Marco,
okay.
you can probably speak more to this, but eventually the loan ends and he just has to go back, right?
So how loans work? So typically what happens? Yeah, here's a little bit of insider soccer knowledge, but a lot of times if like a big team, like a Manchester City or a Manchester United,
which is what he played for.
Yeah, he played for City.
Yeah,
a big team. If there's like an up and coming talent who they want to have a contract with that player and keep them at the team, but they're not necessarily ready to play in like the Premier League, or not necessarily ready to play like in the first team or be a substitute player, and they kind of just need to develop more. They'll buy that player. So like Manchester City, let's say, owned Jamie Tart for, I don't know, let's make something up. Let's say they owned him for 5 years, but realistically they know they're only going to play him in years 4 and 5. They'll loan him out to like another team, which is usually maybe a team in the lower division or just like a worse off team, where he'll get to play on that team like probably every game because he's a really good player relative to that team, and he'll like develop his skills more that way. And then once the main team that owns him is like, all right, he's good enough to be in the first team here, they'll like bring him back at the end of the loan. So you see that a lot at like the beginning of a career. It also happens a lot at the end of a career. So pretty famously, like David Beckham was he went to the LA Galaxy towards the end of his career, and that's obviously really great for the LA Galaxy because they're like, we have this big star that's on our team and stuff, and they get to sell more tickets. But because it was the end of his career and like he wasn't able to play as much, he just ended up taking these like small loan spells to like a few other teams in Europe, and those other teams are happy to do it because it's like we get to sell jerseys with his name on it for the fucking 6 months that he's here or whatever. So those are kind of like the two extremes. But yeah, Jamie Tart definitely more in that first category where, you know, the fictional Manchester City in this universe is like, yeah, he's probably just not ready to play for us yet, so we're going to loan him out to another team until the skills build up, and then we'll bring him back and he can play for us. So if I didn't remember him being on loan, but that makes sense. That's the case of what happened.
So all of season 1, he was only like technically a player for
Richmond.
Richmond.
If he was on loan, yeah, it was like a temporary. It was always going to be a temporary thing.
Oh, okay. That went right over my head. Actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought at the end of season 1, when they like go into relegation, that's what caused him to move. And like, I know they keep mentioning throughout the series that like, oh, how does it feel to be back at Manchester? Like that he used to be at Manchester and maybe he got traded at some point. But
I almost wish it was because they were relegated that he like chose to leave, because I feel like that says something a bit like, but again, I mean, it depends on the vibe of the show. Like the show is all about positivity and stuff, so I think to maybe double down on him being a dick that much and being like, man, fuck this small club, and like leaving after them getting relegated might have been a hard play in terms of like his eventual redemption, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, because he does have some. He goes through development even in season 1, like heading in that direction. It's not like it starts, you know, in season 2 or whatever. Like he is on that path already by the end of season 1. So
yeah,
might have been backpedaling a little bit.
Yeah,
if that happened,
for sure.
Yeah, I will say. So speaking of characters, we'll talk about our favorites and least favorites maybe soon. But a lot of them did have very like either dramatic or just obviously thought out from the very beginning character arcs. Like, that's one thing that, as much as I love the show, it was very, like, almost cheesy in that way. Like, you knew from the beginning it was like everyone was kind of a stereotype of some sort, and you could almost foresee where they would be at by the end of the show. Because obviously Jamie was, like, full of himself and hot-headed, and you're like, okay, by the end we're gonna love him because that's the kind of show that we're at. I guess there's only one case in which, from episode 1, I wouldn't have guessed where he ended up, and that's Nate, so we can talk about that more.
Yeah.
But I feel like everyone else was kind of like, okay, Roy's gonna be a bit less of an asshole, like, Rebecca's gonna love Ted, like, everything else was pretty cut and dry, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so who are your fave characters?
Does it matter who goes first?
No.
I'll go first. Okay. Yeah, so I already mentioned Ted. Like, obviously Ted. He's great. But besides Ted, I also want to mention Roy and Keeley. I think Ted, Roy, and Keeley are my, like, top 3. Mm-hmm. I love the humanization Roy goes through, and I love seeing Keeley's success throughout the 3 seasons, how, like, she comes to work for, like, at first she's just associated with the club because she's, like, dating one of the players, and then she becomes in the PR department, like we were talking about, and then she goes on to have even her own business. So that was all great. And in addition to that, even Roy and Keeley together, because they develop a relationship. And then you also mentioned least favorite characters. I just want to mention one, and this might be controversial, I hope it's not, but I have no idea, that my least favorite character is Nate. But, like, in season 1, I was expecting him to be one of my favorite, my, like, top characters, and then in season 2, like, the whole arc that he goes through felt really manufactured to me. Like, it was kind of that's the one, as we mentioned, that kind of really takes a turn, and I feel like it was not planned at the show's inception, and that it was kind of manufactured to create an antagonist for the final season. But we can talk more about that later. So there's my top 3 and just my one least.
Marco?
In an attempt to not repeat, I mean, listen, Ted, is great across the board. I will say, I feel like I did not enjoy Ted as much in season 3, and that has nothing to do with, like, the performance. It really, I just have problems with season 3. I feel like season 3, it's the longest season, and I also yet feel like the least emotionally connected to anything that happened in season 3, and I feel like season 3 felt, I don't even know how it, like, Carol, you're talking about the arcs feeling a little bit like, oh yeah, you know what's gonna happen, and I would expect in season 3 for them to, like, execute that really well because they know what's gonna happen, but everything, just the pacing of it felt weird, and Ted felt a little bit like he was taking a sidestep for a lot of other characters in his own show, which is fine because a lot of the other characters, like, a lot of cool stuff happened with them, and that's cool. Like, Keeley went on to she had her whole arc in season 3, which is cool, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's nice that all that stuff happened, but I did feel like Ted as a character, I was like, a little bit let down by how much time we got to spend with him and see of him in season 3 compared to seasons 1 and 2. But I really loved him in seasons 1 and 2. And then I really love Rebecca. I think Rebecca is, like, a very fun character and a type of character that we don't see a lot of on TV, in terms of, she has, like, a huge swing in her arc. And it was very, I thought, fun and nice. And I love that actress. Like, her performance as that character is fantastic, I feel like. Just really, really good. Nate, I also have a lot of thoughts on Nate, because, I mean, I'm going to echo what you said, Dan. Like on paper, this idea that, okay, we're going to do 3 seasons, and season 1, it's going to be like this unassuming guy, like the rise of this unassuming guy. Season 2 is going to be the fall, and season 3 will have, like, the eventual redemption of this character. Like, if you, like, pitch that, and, you know, that this guy is, like, starts as this protege of Ted Lasso, and, like, or Ted Lasso, and really is, like, Ted Lasso, and is really, like, looks up to him, and then, like, whatever, starts to get a big head, and then they have this big falling out, but then they end up coming back together at the end. Like, on paper, cool, that's a very nice arc, but something about the way it plays out in the show feels so fucking weird, and we can talk about it, and it's not the performance. I think the actor does a great job, and even within it feeling weird, there are so many moments that I like in it. Like, there are moments of him in season 2 that I think are good. There are really good moments in season 3 that I think are really good. Like, I really love when he ends up working at that restaurant and he just ends up, like, optimizing the way things go at that restaurant, because he's just a really smart fucking, like, good dude who's good at what he does, who, like, went down this wrong path. And like, those moments work, but it's just, as a whole, that character does kind of fall flat. And the other one, and this might be controversial as well, so this is a new controversial one, is by the end of the show, I was like, I've had enough of Coach Beard. Like,
Interesting.
He was
I think I would agree.
He's a funny character that at the start was like, oh, you had to give him these, like, funny lines here or there. It was just a nice little bit of color for the show. And then by season 3, I was like, I don't need this much Coach Beard. Like, I really, it's like the quintessential,
let's
like,
trim the beard a little.
Yeah, let's trim the beard, please. Get this man some clippers. Let's trim that beard a little bit. It was too much by the end of the show for me. Too much of a good thing, where I'm like, yeah, it's funny, but I don't know. Like, maybe a little less Coach Beard, a little more Ted Lasso, you know? Maybe we, like...
You know what I think it is?
Yeah, what's up?
I think Coach Beard is, like, a prime example of, like, what happened to Kevin towards the end of The Office.
Yes.
Like, they really just played into everything that was, like, received well in how, like, funny his character could be, and they just kind of went over the top with it. And I think that was the only problem with Coach Beard.
100%. It's like this relatively normal coach who would, like, say offhand or funny things, and then by season 3, there's, like, a whole episode where we, like, spend an entire episode with him on this, like, shenanigan-infused, like, adventure, and I'm like, I get it. I know what you're trying to do, but yeah, it was too much for me. I didn't need that.
I will say that episode specifically only happened because at the last minute, Apple was like, we want a 10-episode season. And then they're like, actually, we want 12. So they had to, like, make up 2 episodes that could kind of fit anywhere.
Can I guess what the other one is?
Yeah.
Do you know what the other one is? Like,
yeah.
Okay. Is it the Christmas episode?
Yeah.
See, okay. But that's so funny because I love the Christmas
episode.
Oh, okay. I was going to say those are my 2 least favorite episodes in the entire show, and they're both in season 2, and I think season 2 is my least favorite season of the show, like, because of that.
Oh, hot take.
That is a hot take, yeah.
Just because that one, and it makes perfect sense now, felt like it had, like, the most filler side plots, and, like, exactly.
It was just those 2 episodes.
What we were talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
I did like season 3 a little bit better, but I do agree with Marco what you said that season 1 is my favorite. I also think that, not to jump too far ahead right now, but like the plot with Rebecca, like pretending that she wants Ted as the coach, but really just screwing him over and screwing her ex-husband over, could have lasted another season.
Yeah.
I felt like that was a little rushed, and I think I would have liked it better if that was, like, stretched one more season. I don't think it would have been, like, spreading it too thin, because I got a little bit bored during season 2 with the whole Ted therapy plot. As much as I like Ted's character, I think that part of the plot was, like, his weakest era of the 3 seasons. Yeah, so I would have liked to see, like, the guys of Rebecca's plot against Ted, not against Ted, but involving Ted, last into season 2.
I guess that's a good segue into me saying my favorite characters, because I wanted to comment. If that lasted longer, we would have lost Higgins for longer, and I think Higgins is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, Higgins is great.
I grew to like Higgins a lot at the end.
You're so silly.
We could have involved him in some other way, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm not a story writer. I don't know. But my favorite characters are Sam and Keeley. But just to round out a top 3, I think I'd have to put Higgins in there. Yeah, I'm surprised neither of you commented anything about Sam. I love Sam. I'm kind of surprised that he ended up being such a major role of all the other players they could have chosen, but I did love, like, every direction that his story went into.
Sam's great. I do love Sam.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more because I'm going to ask, like, favorite episodes, favorite plot lines, if you guys have that kind of answer later on. But some of mine do involve Sam, and that's why he's one of my faves. I just feel bad for him. And he's so young. I keep forgetting that all of these football players are, like, 22. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Little children dealing with all of this. Yeah, those are my favorites. And then my least favorite was Rupert, but obviously he's written to be a villain.
Oh okay.
Yeah. He's a literal mustache twirling villain.
Yeah.
Like, he is the most, like...
Quick note about Rupert, too, is, like, for the first few episodes until we meet him in the pub in like halfway through season 1, I think it was. I thought like in the pilot episode that again we all watched together, the guy at the beginning in the first scene that she's like arguing with was her ex-husband, but that was just the old coach of the team she was firing to then hire Ted. And I thought like when we saw Rupert for the actual first time, he just like shaved and was like classier all of a sudden. So that was a little confusing at first, but I caught on quick.
That's good. But yeah, so he's obviously the worst, but Nate is also the worst. Although I will say, since you both brought it up, his story arc was kind of out of nowhere, but I thought they actually executed it really well, just because of kind of the archetype that they wrote him to be, like a person who had never gotten any like attention or praise or accolades, to like have that immediately like blow up his head and have no one else really know, like no one, like especially when his like parents were telling him to just like be humble and not think about it, which like should have been the response that he did, obviously. But yeah, to have that kind of make him go a bit insane. Like it was like 0 to 100, but I think there are certain people for which that like would be the response. And then having someone on the other side then like stoke that fire, like Rupert hiring him and stuff and encouraging him to continue to be a horrible person, I think made sense to me. I will say like his return maybe made the least sense to me in the way that it was executed, because I was kind of surprised. I completely
disagree.
Really?
Like it's flipped for me. Like,
okay.
Oh, sorry. Like you can.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was surprised that like the players approached him to want him to come back, and then he said no to that, and then like it was Beard in the end who convinced him, which like I don't know. Maybe they wanted all of those people to have more screen time.
But he was a diamond dog.
He was a diamond dog, which is I love that running joke. That joke is really funny.
Yeah, I do love all the yapping that happens whenever the diamond dogs assemble. That is very fun.
Me too.
But what were you going to say, Dan?
Fun. I think just like my main problem with the Nate thing is, and in reference to how I said like my opinion's flipped, is that I really didn't like his decline in season 2. But that being said, I mentioned how I like season 3 more than season 2, and part of that is because once that like explanation for why Nate is where he's at by season 3 is, you know, told, no matter what I think about that, I did like how he started to go through that redemption in season 3 more so than the sudden decision in the writing team to like even have this happen at all. It's like I preferred it to never have happened, but it's like now that it has happened, I'm glad to start seeing him on the up and up. I think like at the beginning of season 2 when he was like starting to wear suits and act a little bit cocky, I thought it was just going to be like a running joke, like, oh, now the whatever his title, like the equipment guy is like he's promoted and now he's got a little bit of an attitude, haha. But then it turned out to be like actually a threatening plot to set up the villain, like the main villain of. It's weird to say villain like on a show like
antagonist.
This,
I should be using the word antagonist of season 3.
Yeah,
and like I really hated the last shot of season 2, like how he turned around and like it was the reveal that Nate was the coach of the antagonist soccer team for going into the next season. That felt really like a Marvel after credit scene, like setting up a future villain.
It did.
So it just the degree to which it felt manufactured, like we need to set up something for our final season, where I don't think that was necessary at all. I think like the drama of Ted rejuvenating this team was more than enough. So yeah, that really, it heavily contributed to season 2 being my least favorite season. But once again, after that had all happened and taken place and was done with, I started to like it more when Nate became a human being again and it was off of his Joker arc.
See, this is very weird for me because I'm like in between both of your opinions. Like, I think my biggest thing with the whole Nate arc is I think it gets the big moments wrong. Like, first of all, to touch on your point, Dan, also at the start of season 2 when he's wearing suits and he's kind of being a dick and taking himself more seriously, I was like, oh yeah, this will just be exactly what you said, like a running joke, and at some point him and Ted will have a conversation and he'll come around, whatever. But when they double down on it, when he like tries to kiss Keely and he's whatever, like really fully becoming a villain, and I started to realize like, oh shit, I think they're just actually gonna like really play into that. I was fine with that. What pissed me off the most in season 2 was really just like what felt manufactured was like the big moments of the riff actually happening, where I felt like a lot of the smaller stuff throughout the season was fine, but I needed something a little bit different in terms of like the actual moment, the big like cumulative moment of like, this is it, fuck everything, like the rift. And then very similarly in season 3, like I alluded to, and like you said, of him becoming a human again and working at the restaurant and like having this relationship and like his relationship with his parents and all that stuff, I liked all that stuff. And then I felt like, and this isn't even just his moment, it's also Ted's moment, and part of why I was so frustrated with Ted in season 3 as well is I feel like I needed like a scene between them together, him and Ted together, like a big, nice, emotional, like end of the show scene of them to like make up, to really make that arc work for everyone, like not just for him but also for Ted, because like him doing that is as much his own arc as it is like something for Ted to have to deal with. And I feel like by the end of the show it's just not dealt with. It's just kind of like he's back, and we didn't really have this moment just between the two of them that really satisfied me in that way, for him to then be able to like be on the team again. I don't know. Like again, like the idea of it, some of the smaller moments within it I was fine with, but I just feel like the actual big moments of the arc kind of let me down. And yeah, like the super villain reveal at the end of season 2 was kind of silly as well, and I'm like, I don't know, like a lot of these big moments of his arc aren't hitting for me, which sucks, because on paper I like that idea, to your point, Carol, of like this guy that's never had attention, has never been taken seriously, who now thinks he's like hot shit. Like that is potentially very interesting, especially when it's a character that was as likable as Nate was in season 1. Like Nate was such a like sweet, fun character in season 1, and the idea of taking that character and bringing him into straight up villain territory is fun. Like I like that, and it's one of the few arcs in the show that doesn't go the way you would expect it to go. Like we talked about with all the other characters, where it's like you more or less know where these characters are going to end up, but the fact that they tried something different with Nate was so nice. But I don't know why they just couldn't nail those big moments for me with that arc, and it left me feeling a little bit like underwhelmed about the whole thing.
I don't know if I even just like the idea on paper, I think it still would have raised a little bit of an issue with me though, because thinking about it, like I kind of asked myself, what would that scenario, what question does that prompt for the viewer? And it's like the idea that Ted treated this guy so nice, like he promoted this equipment manager to the coaching team. Like that's a big promotion. I don't know much about sports, as we've talked about, but I don't know like how common that would be.
That is unheard of. That would literally never happen. But yeah, yeah.
And there's a line towards, I think it's like the season 2 finale, where Nate tells Ted like, "Oh, you crushed my dreams," and I'm like, he gave you like the best promotion you could ever think of. Like he gave you everything you have right now, and I don't know where this is coming from. And the idea that a wholesome teacher figure such as Ted, who's just trying to do everything he can to like make this team the best it can possibly be, and this one problem student being Nate, sort of who starts out humble and is given everything he needs to succeed, and still, despite all of that, choosing to decline and like take this other path. It's like, what lesson is that kind of invoking? But then I think about, maybe it's a lesson of like, you know, even the most unsuspecting problem children, if like thinking about a teacher in a classroom, like there's always gonna be one student who like causes a lot of problem, like way more problems than any other student, right? And like the lesson could be just like, it's a case like that, even with adults and a soccer team and a coach. But then I don't think like you were saying, Marco, if that was the case, there was no scene with him and Ted both learning that lesson in season 3. So I feel like either way, the landing of it was kind of botched. But again, just to reiterate, I don't know if even the concept on paper and that it happened at all sits quite right with me.
See,
that's my biggest problem with
so I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Okay.
I don't know. I completely, that's a very good point you're raising. And my reaction is this, and I don't know if this is the case, or like maybe Carol, if you have a thought that agrees with this or not. But Well, I guess we'll find out. Carol just shrugged, so we're gonna see.
I don't know what you're gonna say.
Like the whole Ted Lasso, the whole show is pitched on this idea of like relentless positivity from Ted. Like as the show goes on, it's like we are unwavering in the fact that Ted is gonna be a good person and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like in terms of what does it raise question wise for the audience, like one takeaway had it been executed better would be the idea that like you should be a good person regardless of the fact that people are going to take advantage of you and misinterpret that. Like that's a takeaway of life is like, yeah, you're going to be a good person to some people and they're going to appreciate it and see it, and then you're going to be a good person to other people and they're never going to think it's enough. And like for a show that's all about that positivity aspect and the current political climate, that's something that I could have seen.
The only one here without glasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretended
a
to
nice
push
little
the glasses
visual
up on your
gag.
nose because no one else
Yeah.
can see that. Just to give
Yeah,
context.
I love when we do visual gags on this podcast, like when Carol points.
We should really start recording the
Yeah,
visuals,
we really
but that's
should.
a issue.
Well,
for a
every
later
time we
day.
do, we lose half the footage.
Yeah, that's true. We're really bad at it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But anyway, so just to get to the end of the point, I think if the arc had been better and it had been like a commentary on it's really easy to be a kind when people are appreciative of it and like reciprocate it, but it's way harder to be kind and a good person when people don't. Like that could have been the intention. Do I think they nailed that execution? No, I don't think it comes across that way at all, and exactly to what we're talking about, because that theme never is like paid off. Like there is no payoff to that. It's more just like, Nate, he figured it out. He stopped being an idiot. All right, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like there's no real emotional payoff to that.
I will say one
I
thing
totally agree.
that like
Oh.
upon reflection and distance, I think kind of frustrates me is, yes, I know relentless positivity, but it feels like disingenuous sometimes. Like even the way that like he forgives Rebecca so quickly for telling him that like, I brought you here to a different country, took you away from your family just to fuck over my ex-husband because I thought you were going to ruin this team. Like you can be a good person, but you can still be like, that really hurt me, that's fucked up, and you can still communicate that with someone, but then also with time forgive them. And so like things like that, and even you mentioned like him not having a long drawn out sit down conversation with Nate about everything that like he did to him or the ways they wronged each other. That is something that like the relentless positivity kind of takes away. Like I will say part of why I love the show is because it came out like 2020, 2021, 2022. It was a really depressing time. I don't know if you guys remember why.
Oh, I remember. That's why we started the podcast.
Those were the best 3 years of my life. Yeah.
But it was just, I was really down in the dumps. So something like relentlessly positive like this was nice because of how like, you know, manufactured and fake and unrealistic it felt. But like that was comforting at the time to be taken out of the real world into something like that. Like
that's very fair.
At the same time, I also watched things like Schitt's Creek, which I feel like was also similarly, I think neither of you have watched it also, but things like that were also really...
I think we both watched it.
I watched half
Oh,
of
you
it.
have? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So things like that are also just like really positive and unrealistic. Like, so that's why I appreciated it more at the time. And now that I'm out of it and I'm getting back to my more cynical, realistic self, I'm like, I wish they did like have some more of that. It didn't need to like, he didn't need to be a dick or like not forgive people, but just a bit more real conversation, I think, would have just like elevated the show like slightly more.
I feel like what we really needed was those other characters, whether it's Rebecca or whether it's Nate in season 3. Like, if you want to just have the beat of Ted being like, it's fine, relentless positivity, we're good, everything's good. Like, fine, still do that. But we almost needed those other characters to then really like push the point and have that conversation and be like, hey, it's really fucked up what I did to you. Like, why are you okay with it? And to give that like standing on your soapbox moment to like explain the theme of the show, which sometimes can come across as really stupid and cheesy or whatever, but I feel like the show, because it is so positive to the point of like it's unrealistic how positive he is, right? So I feel like you almost need a scene, whether it's with him and Rebecca or with him and Nate, where he literally explains his ethos out and is like, yeah, of course, like of course, Nate, it's fucked up what you did and that you took advantage of me, and of course I was hurt by it, and et cetera, but like, you know, saying what I just said, right? Of like, you shouldn't only be a good person to people who reciprocate that, like, otherwise that defeats the point of being a good person. Like, whatever. We needed, like, that one scene, I think, just to ground it a little bit, because otherwise, yeah. And that's also part of why I feel like I've talked about Ted in season 3 feeling like his arc was rushed, and it's because we never get those moments, and it's just him being like, yeah, it's all good, and then it just ends, and it's all good. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's all good, but, like, I need you to have a moment, like, with us, the audience, and be, like, real. Like, just one. You don't have to be a dick, but just be real. Like, that's it.
I will say him having, like, his panic attacks, I guess, was supposed to be the way that we were told that his constant positivity is unrealistic and ungenuine, and his, you know, other emotions will force themselves out in other ways. And that's the panic attack, and that's why I needed the therapy.
It's not.
But, like, that's not, like, enough.
I felt, yeah.
It also wasn't executed
as
well as it could have been enough if it was executed, like, 100% correctly, but I don't feel like it was. I feel like it was kind of, to your point, Dan, like you said, it was one of the lower points. Like, I felt like it was a little bit drawn out and a little bit repetitive and a little bit, like, simplistic. Like, we didn't really get to the bottom of anything in a way that worked for me.
Well, he said his dad killed himself, and, like, but, like, even that was like, okay, like, that is an interesting part of the backstory and like does inform your character in some ways, but yeah, I feel like beyond that it wasn't really dealt
until
into
season
more.
3. I think it must have been season 3 where we meet his mom, right? And that I loved, where we finally see a whole different side of him. Like, he's angry at her for the first time we ever see in the show.
Moms will do that to you.
Oh, they will. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like taking out all of his, like, his trauma and anger about what happened to his dad on her, and that's a great character moment. And but also because we're talking about Ted and what we were talking about with how Rebecca treated him and like what she said to him at the end of season 1, and how we didn't like his therapy arc, or you know, some to different degrees, all of us had a problem with it in season 2. I would have rathered season 2 been like starting with them being at odds and their arc together being towards the end of that season, repairing their relationship, going into the final season and taking the win back. And then I know we've talked about Nate a lot, but just I meant to mention this like minutes ago, but I didn't have a chance. But like, I feel like if they had just made Jamie what Nate turned into, and maybe extended his redemption arc a little bit, because he does start to he starts on that path a little early, like way back in season 1, talking about Jamie. And I think Jamie filling the role of what Nate turns into would have worked for me a lot better. It wouldn't have felt as manufactured, because Jamie starts as a dick, like a total dick, and we kind of so as a result we kind of get like the Jamie redemption and the Nate fallen redemption, and it feels a little redundant. I feel like they could have just streamlined that a little bit with those two characters, making the redemption thing into one character's arc, and have Nate just kind of remain more likable side character, even if it meant he had less to do, you know?
That's very fair. It is a very valid point.
Yeah, I will say, because you both kind of alluded to your favorite seasons in order. My favorite season actually was season 2. My favorites go like season 2, season 1, and then season 3. I just felt like they kind of tried to fit too much plot into season 3. Like, even today when I was going through and looking at the summaries of all the episodes, I'm like, all of this happened in this like 12 episode season? Like, just two.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which I understand, but it was like they got a new player, they lost a new player.
I like that
like,
plot a lot, and I wish it lasted longer.
So
I wish like he didn't just disappear.
Yeah, but they fit in too much. Like, I don't even know what it was.
Works at like a new office.
Nate quit his job and got a girlfriend, and Keely has a whole relationship, and then also like a video scandal, and like Colin's gay.
I forgot about
and
Colin being gay. That was the whole thing.
So much.
Yeah.
Trent came to write a book.
I like that too. How like Trent was now in the coaching room, like kind of part of the gang.
I like Trent too. I was gonna say Trent's a really good character.
I guess Trent is also one of my faves. He's an icon.
Yeah, and then on top of all of that, we have the Nate redemption arc, and and then winning the series.
Yeah.
So there is a lot.
Yeah.
Also, to comment on what you were saying, Dan, I think Jamie's redemption arc is different enough, simply because they also tie in like his relationship with his father, but also his friendship with Roy, and also his like relationship with Keely. For me, there was enough other stuff that I feel like there was like different things to chew on that they could focus on like at different points, and how it all like worked together at the end. But also I'm biased because Jamie and Roy's friendship is one of my
I like
favorite,
that friendship too.
like story arcs for the whole thing. I love
that
those
too,
boys
and I see that
together.
for sure.
Yeah.
Running through Amsterdam.
Oh yeah, that was great too. And I agree. I think so. I guess maybe to amend my statement is just like cutting the Nate thing, even like leaving the Jamie the arc as it is, but like the Nate arc needed work for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jamie I enjoyed. Jamie and Roy's relationship I enjoyed. Teaching Roy to ride a bike, that was nice.
That was fun. That was cute.
That was like one of my favorite moments in the show. That was I don't remember what season that was. It must have been towards the end though.
It was 3.
Okay, yeah.
That was season 3.
I liked season 3 a lot. I know there's a lot that happens and it feels bloated at times, but
Yeah. I think the good stuff in season 3 is very good, but it's bloated. It is definitely a bloated season because the episodes are twice as long, and it's just like, oof, there is a lot happening in this show. Like, we are really trying to get this all done in one season right now.
And I will say part of the maybe like issues with some of the character arcs or the amount of screen time characters were given in the last season is probably because Apple was like, set us up for spin-offs. Because I mean, nothing has been officially confirmed, but even when you like go on Wikipedia, they're like, oh, we don't really plan for anything, but if we did plan for something, it would probably happen at least 2 or 3 years after the show ends. And I'm like, sounds like you're planning something. But
I was unaware of that. That is kind of disappointing. But it is Apple, so I'm not surprised. Also, speaking of Apple, I don't want to talk too long about the Apple thing, but that was just like talking production-wise, like you could really tell this was an Apple TV production. Because like every time someone's holding a phone or like on a computer, like it is shot like an Apple commercial, and that was one thing that really bothered me. Like just especially the lighting of it, and often the music choice felt like very commercial, like tech commercial ish. So like I said, I don't want to talk too long about it because it's something that it's outside of the plot and outside of the important stuff, the characters, but it was a little bit distracting at times. I wish this was on, if this was like a Netflix series or something with like a whole different production team, I think it would have been a huge help. Even the fact that this is the only thing, pretty much like the only series worth watching on Apple TV Plus, I really wish like...
Severance.
Oh yeah, I guess. I've never seen Severance, but I've heard it's pretty good. But one of the few things that's worth watching, let's just say. I do overall just wish that it would have been in the hands of a more accessible and also better production value providing streaming service production company. But that's all I want to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, because when the first season, I don't know when exactly, but at some point during its production or pre-production, they said that they did plan from the beginning to have it only be 3 seasons long because Jason Sudeikis' availability got really busy after 3 seasons. I don't know what he's in, so I don't know why that was the truth. But yeah, I feel like the creative team probably didn't have any plans for a spin-off, but just because it was so well received and simply just because of the like sports and like English football nature of it all, they probably got so much fucking money from like sports sponsors. Like the amount of money that those soccer clubs have access to is unfathomable. And even like Nike creating merch for them afterwards, and all the football clubs signing off on like their logos being used and their stadiums, like I'm sure that motivated the higher ups, and that is just something that I think is always going to be an issue with all large productions and streamers, but whatever. We're going to have to get over it.
I have some bones to pick, because if we're talking about like real life sponsorships and et cetera, some of that stuff, this show for me did at times, it was a lot better in the first season, because the first season, like, it made allusions to like the Premier League or whatever, like, to make it feel like it was happening in real life. But seasons 2 and 3 really double down on that stuff in a way that bothered me, and I want to give some examples of why. Because there are characters in this show who are real life people, and what I mean by that is like they are not even trying to pretend that they're not the real life people, like players and stuff, that they are. And in the first season, when it's like somewhat fictionalized, and yeah, maybe you hear the name of like a real team, but we're not really specific about anything, that doesn't really matter. But then when you get to season 3 and like the actual famous soccer coach Pep Guardiola, who coaches Manchester City, shows up for a fucking cameo, and I'm like, yeah, but now you're breaking my brain, because like there are characters in this who are based on real life people, and if you're telling me that we're supposed to pretend this is happening right now in real life, like that doesn't line up in a way that I know would not affect you guys at all. But from a production, like,
I'm trying to remember when this cameo happened.
yeah, well, it wouldn't affect you guys, but it's like it's something that, to your point, Dan, like the production necessarily of this being like an Apple thing didn't stand out to me too much, because I'm just gonna take it all in and not really give a shit. But I understand why for you, like that would totally stand out. This is like the inverse for me, where everything I'm gonna say is not gonna matter to you guys, but it bothered me so much.
Okay, go on.
So first of all, Roy Kent in this show, right? Who I love the character of Roy Kent, is Roy Keane. There's a very famous soccer player from the 90s called Roy Keane, who was known for being a tough guy, this crazy tough guy with a heart of gold that everyone on his team talked about seeing, like, being such a softie, like low-key, but like always had this tough guy demeanor, who then went on to do like punditry and stuff like that, and he still does punditry to this day. Like, I listen to podcasts where he talks about soccer and stuff. It's like, it is him. Like, it's just, they did not, like, it literally is him, right? Except, like, Manchester United is also a team that they, like, reference and show the logo of and etc. in this. So that's, like, one thing that is very frustrating for me, that breaks my brain a little bit, because, like, the actual guy played for Manchester United, and I'm like, okay, but, like, so what fucking universe is this taking place in? You know? Like, what continuity is this taking place in? Like, what is the history of soccer that this is taking place in? That's one thing. Jamie Tart is very, 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 like, almost as much as Roy Keane, based on another famous soccer player that's playing right now, who plays for Manchester City as well. So that kind of broke my brain a little bit.
What's his name?
Jack Grealish, I want to say his name is, or something like that.
Okay. Just because in my research, like, obviously his character wasn't based on this person, but he was named in part after Jamie Shackleton, who played in Leeds United, who also had a Baby Shark fan chant. But I don't know how you would put Jamie Shackleton into Baby Shark. Like, you could Jamie Tart, but that's not
that's their problem to figure out. So he's very much based on a real person. And then in season 3, the player that they buy, who shows up, like,
he had to have been based off of
the player Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Like, he just is that guy. Like, it's, again, like, no attempt was made to not make him that guy. So those are the 3 that stand out to me. And then there's even just, like, other characters where it's like, oh, you're kind of like this person in the world of soccer, etc., etc. Which, in and of itself, that stuff is all fine, and it worked for me in season 1, when, again, we are in this very fictionalized version of reality. But then when you get to season 3 and it's like actual Premier League, like, logos, actual Premier League teams and jerseys, and etc., etc., to have coaches from actual Premier League teams, like, not just random ass coaches, but like arguably the most famous coach in soccer right now, actually do a cameo on the show. All that stuff just really stood out to me, where I'm like, okay, I get that you have money now, but you've built a world that was meant to be more fictionalized, and the world that you've built doesn't fit into pretending that this is, like, actual reality. So, I don't know. On a production level, I wish they had just picked a zone and stuck with it. Like, either fictionalize it all, or if you want to put it in reality, but then don't have a character named Roy Kent. Like, that's frustrating if, like, you know about the actual reality. So that's all I'm saying. From a production level, as they got more money, those choices started to bother me.
Yeah, because they do, like, admit to basing some of the characters on real soccer players. And obviously their personal lives, I'm sure, are entirely fictionalized. But
of course, yeah.
I think just to take, like, the different, like, characters you might have on a team. But also, I don't know, I know it might have been too on the nose to name Roy Kent after Roy Keane and also take his personality. Maybe it would have been less jarring if they kind of did a mix and match, like they took a personality but just made up a totally different name. So yeah, that did seem a little lazy. Sorry, there's also screaming now that you might hear in my audio, but it's football related, because Netherlands is playing whoever right now.
Yeah,
and there's like
there's
a
a big
sports
thing
pub
happening
right
right
downstairs, so people are
Are
watching
you
it
serious?
outside.
That's
big game.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's like this is a great soccer summer. There's like 2 major
Euros.
tournaments. There's like the European tournament, the American tournament. This is great. This is a great time to be recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great time for soccer. Okay, where do we want to go next? We talked about some characters that we like. What do you have any favorite episodes that stood out, or any specific arcs of either characters or stories or plot that you enjoyed more than others?
I really liked. I think in terms of arcs, I'm inclined to say Ted Lasso again, but like he already gets enough love. Like he is the title character, so I'm going to mention Roy and Keely. I think it must have been in season 3 when they're apart again, but like I know by the end of the show they come back together, and that was my favorite because like,
but not forever. She ends up with none of them.
oh yeah, okay,
They just hook up, but she also has casually hooked up with James. Like she hooks up with Roy like
Right.
once, but then like he asks her out and she doesn't say yes, and then Jamie also asks her to like be his PR manager, and she says yes, but she's like, it's not romantic because they try to make her choose between
yeah, and
them,
she chooses
and she's
none
like,
of
fuck
them.
you guys.
Yeah, and I like that a lot. And then also just, I think like Roy's general humanization. I know like at the beginning he is kind of just a stereotypical like brute tough guy with like Marco was talking about with the real Roy Keane, like a heart of gold, like way buried underneath there. But I like the actor a lot.
Buried under chest hair and a gravelly
I
voice.
like the actor a lot and the performance, and just like he has a really fun's the wrong word, but like a really enjoyable screen presence with how unamused he is constantly at everyone else. So that aspect was, I think, my favorite. And then as you guys are talking about yours, I'm also going to pick my favorite episode because I didn't like prepare that, but I could look at the episodes to remember, and I'm going to choose which one what I think was my favorite and maybe least favorite. Actually, I already mentioned my least favorites, the season 2 Christmas and Beard episode.
Yeah.
So
I will say, before you get too lost in Wikipedia or wherever you're going to go, Roy Kent was just hired as like a writer. He's a writer on the show, and he wasn't supposed to act in it at all. But then he sent in an audition, and everyone's like, did you just send in an audition? And he's like, yep. And then they liked it, so they hired him because he wasn't an actor. He was just like a writer in a comic.
yeah, because that's right.
So
Because,
it worked out well.
Like at some point throughout the show, I started paying attention to his name in like the writing section of the credits. I was like, oh well. Once I learned basically what his name was in real life and caught on, I was like, what's he doing there? Has he been there like since season 1? So that was cool.
Marco, how about you?
I mean, I really like Keely's arc and I really like Jamie's arc. I think both of them, even if they're a little bit predictable, yeah, like I said, I think everybody's arc for me in this show like has moments that I don't necessarily buy, like throughout the whole thing. I also, to go back to your point about like it was always conceived as like a 3-season show, it does not feel like that to me. Like, and if it was, that's great. But in the back of my mind when I'm watching the show, like season 1 feels like a nice standalone season of television, and then season 2 and 3 feel like, and now we get to do 2 more seasons, and so let's make an arc for everyone over 2 seasons of television. But regardless, I think, yeah, those two. Now this is crazy because Dan, your 2 least favorite episodes, like one of them, which is the Coach Beard episode, is my least favorite, but I think the Christmas episode is my favorite episode of the show, which is so crazy. But it's like, this show for me doesn't have true like standalone standout episodes the way, and it's just top of mind right now, but something like The Bear does, where like I can talk about, and I think it's because The Bear like plays with structure so much in its episodes. Dan and I were just talking about this, but I can talk about the 7 Fishes episode, or I could talk about even like the first episode of season 3, which was like a montage episode, like an entire episode of television that was montage, which was crazy, as we talked about. Or the Tina episode from season 3, or
that's the best one of the season.
It's so good. And then also the fucking like the pregnancy episode with the daughter and the mom in season 3, which is my second favorite. I love that episode. I think that episode's great. The Richie episode from season 2, like The Bear has these moments where you're like, that's a standalone episode. Ted Lasso does not have that for me. Like, everything kind of blends together. It's just like the arc of the show, which is fine. It's just another way of doing television. Yeah. But for that reason, the Christmas episode, and as you guys know, I love a Christmas episode. I love a little Christmas magic. All I needed was Santa Claus to fly across the screen at the end. It was,
and it happened.
That's literally it. And like that, because it was so standalone and it was so silly, I was like, I'm in. I love this. Like, it was an interesting choice for a breath of fresh air, in terms of the placement in the season as well. But I really, really liked it, even if it is kind of out of place. So that's going to be my favorite. Coach Beard episode is my least favorite episode, for all the opposite reasons. It was like trying to do the same thing, and it just failed at all of them for me. So
I will say, like, my favorite part of the Christmas episode was having all of the players at Higgins' house.
Yeah, that was
very
that
cute.
Ensued. Yeah. No, it was so good. Yeah, I will say, like, I guess, are you done, Marco? Okay, so I will say, similarly, I think some of my least favorite arcs are, like, Beard and Jane, because also, like, I didn't get as fed up with Beard in general as I think you guys did by the end, but I was kind of over the, like, back and forth with Beard and Jane. It felt very tired, and also, like, it's so clearly, like, unhealthy, but they're just like, he's kooky, so they're perfect. I don't know. Although I did find out today that Jane is played by the storyboard editor of the show, so I guess they just cast people who were working behind the scenes for every fucking role. I don't know. But that was interesting. But outside of that fun fact, I just hated their whole dynamic. And so part of why I also didn't really like the Beard episode was that it was all about, like, finding her. And I was like, that's a waste of an episode. But I guess they had to fill the roster.
I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
For the Beard episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I love his little one-liners. I love how unpredictable he is, but I don't think we needed to follow him for a whole episode, but that's okay. But my favorite episodes were ones where he wasn't in a lot. Amsterdam is probably the one they're in Amsterdam. I don't know what it's called. I don't think it's called Amsterdam. Was my favorite episode for sure, like, easily, because of mostly Jamie and Roy. Like, I kind of was also a little bit bored and didn't really care about Ted's storyline in that episode. He, like, thought he was on shrooms and discovered total football or whatever. But everyone else, like Rebecca meeting that man on the boat, I loved that. Everything else was great, but Ted was boring, and Beard wasn't really in it after he gave Ted shrooms that didn't work. So that's why it worked well for me. But I do have a runner-up for a favorite episode. It's called Rainbow. It's the one where Roy just finishes coaching, like, the little kids, and Keeley convinces him to start, like, being a pundit, but then Ted is having trouble with Isaac as the new captain, so he asks Roy to, like, help coach him, and then at the end he, like, when Harry Met Sally style runs from the show to the field, and, like, that whole episode just has a lot of, like, rom-com, like, literal lines and references, and obviously we know rom-coms are my bread and butter, so that's definitely my second favorite
That was
episode.
a very good episode. I liked that one a lot.
But in terms of arcs, I mentioned Roy and Jamie's friendship, but something I also really liked was Sam's arc where he, like, had that sponsorship with Dubai Air, and then found out that they were, like, polluting his hometown, and then, like, all the players banded together and, like, crossed out their names on the jerseys. And, like, it was a little cheesy, and, like, I also want to talk about maybe some, like, least favorite arcs, but there were a few that were kind of a little hitting it too hard over the head, and so it was cheesy, but I did still find it like, very moving, and for, like, a show that is so tied into the world of English sports, where a lot of them are sponsored by horrible companies like that, it kind of, I was surprised that they took that stance and that Apple let them take that stance, so it was really nice to see that on television.
I think, yeah, like that's
And I
that's
appreciated
what
that.
spoiled that for me a lot, was the fact that this is an Apple production. Like, it's sponsored
Yeah.
by a
Yeah.
horrible company, but I do like the idea of what that plot line was going for. I think it just, if it was executed a little better, but I do like how it ended with everyone blocking out the sponsorships on their jerseys. That was a very nice moment. But I do have my favorite episode now. If I don't want to interrupt you, Carol, but
Yeah.
okay.
No,
I
you're
think
all good.
the mom episode is actually my favorite one. Mom City, I think it's called.
It's really good.
But because of some that you guys mentioned, I want to talk about some runners up as well. Firstly, being the series finale, I think was, all things said and done, like any problems we had with the series, I think the ending itself was pretty satisfying and very emotional. And then also the season 1 finale, I liked a lot. How it ended, them going into relegation, and the last scene with Ted and Rebecca, where they're like hopeful for what's to come. And where Jamie ends up specifically too. I liked how all that was handled. So, and then the Amsterdam episode. But I will disagree with the Ted thing. I think that was my favorite part of the episode, how he's high and like reinvents the total football idea. The drug sequence was really out there and well done, I think, in my opinion. But I get it. It's really different.
Yeah, just didn't do it for me. But I did love the setting of like the American cafe that he went to do all that.
Yeah, and Rebecca on the boat was good, and Jamie and Roy and all that stuff was great in that episode.
And I will say, speaking of like storylines that we didn't really love, one thing that I also wanted to comment when I was rereading the notes and the summaries of all the episodes, I literally teared up like writing about the last like the series finale. I was like why am I doing this? That's so silly. But some least favorite arcs, I think I was really upset that when Keely met like Jack in the 3rd season, the like person who's funding her PR firm, I was really excited for her to get into this new relationship, and I was a little bit upset that like first they were like, okay, we're gonna have this lesbian love bomb her, and I was like, okay, I know, stereotypical, but you can't give a girl a healthy girl-on-girl relationship. And then especially when her video came out and her girlfriend and also her girlfriend's like father were trying to get her to like publish a like sorry letter, then that resulted in them like breaking up and her losing all of her funding. I was like really upset that that's where that storyline took us. And speaking of cheesiness, when they had like all the guys go through all the pictures and like delete them, and like I think Jamie or someone had a whole fucking little speech about how you can't do that. Which like I obviously I appreciate the sentiment. I agree with the idea. You shouldn't be keeping nudes on your phone of people that you're not in contact with, or that people like who haven't given you express permission to have those. I get it. I appreciate that. But it was just like, come on guys, you're literally like talking to camera right now.
Yeah, that whole thing felt like an after-school special. Like,
yeah,
it was a little crazy, and I don't know why. Like, a lot of shows have done an arc like that.
Because it's such a prevalent problem, Marco.
It is. Well, I guess the Newsroom had an arc like that as well, which was especially weird because Olivia Munn is in the Newsroom, and she had been caught up in like a nude leak like way back in the day with one of the like first celebrity nude leaks that had happened. So yeah, but then like again, just one of those brain-breaking moments where like the show had an arc about it, and like it happened to Olivia Munn's character, and I'm like, come on guys, like this is very on the nose. Like, yeah, we understand that this is a fucked up thing, but yeah, it's super after school special. Like, just a little unnecessary.
Yeah, well, as we have been talking about, I think there are quite a few moments that the only problem is the execution. I think the ideas are there, and this is a good example of that.
Yeah.
If it was just executed, and stemming back to the production, I think a lot of it does stem back to the quality of the production, just like boiling down to how it was shot and the accompanying soundtrack. I think it comes across a lot of times as like a PSA as opposed to a work of fiction. And I think that would have helped sell it a lot more if it was just shot with a little more integrity.
Yeah.
And if Apple wasn't behind the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I hate Apple so goddamn much.
Yeah. Because the like clean, crisp, like I totally get what you're saying, Dan. Like just the look of the whole show was in like ultra HD. Everything was spotless. Every color was bright. Yeah. It definitely does get tiring and definitely leans into the cheese a bit more, even if they don't mean to. Like they'll be having like an honest, open conversation, but you're still like, this really does just look too perfect.
Yeah.
I even felt like the color palette choice of the team was like odd for me as well, because you could have made it maybe in like a warmer color, or, like. But with the color palette choice that they had and the design of the locker room, it always felt a little bit like, I don't know, just like you said, just like that ultra crisp HD kind of like, it looks too good. Like, it looks too polished and clean. It doesn't necessarily feel like a warm, like, locker room, or, I think back to like not behind the scenes, but like photos and stuff of like actual soccer team locker rooms. And there's just a sense of like, personality there that I don't necessarily feel when we're in the locker room or we're in Ted Lasso's office, or it feels very sterile. I guess the word I'm looking for is sterile. It has that very like clean, sterile, like silver and blue, that kind of aesthetic that I'm like, I'm very not into this right now.
Yeah, it was the cleanest locker room I think I've ever
like,
seen.
Like ridiculously clean. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it looked like an operating room a lot of times with the way the lighting was and stuff. Like, there was no mood lighting. It was just this incredible, like, fluorescent overhead lighting. I'm like, this doesn't, like, feel like a locker. This feels like a set. Like, it legitimately feels like a set instead of, you know, oh, you actually just went to a locker room and shot in a locker room, which would have felt a lot better, but whatever.
Yeah. Like, it was very commercial, and I get that with a show being as positive as it is, and that's the whole idea behind the show. Like, there might have been some people on the production team being like, yeah, obviously it's gonna be a very bright show with the subject matter that we're dealing with. But I actually think, you know, I'm not a cinematographer, but I think it would have been interesting to try the exact subject matter that we have in the show, shot with a bit of even just like a dimmer tone, like just to kind of contrast the plot with the look and sort of mirror more what, you know, Ted and the team are dealing with inside, rather than just the superficial positivity that the show kind of radiates. I think it would have been an interesting experiment. I think they might have just gone a little too literal with, oh, this is a really happy show, let's make it bright and preppy.
Yeah.
So.
Totally agree. Totally.
Okay, can I ask you guys a couple questions about what you thought about certain storylines that just haven't come up at all?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you think about Rebecca and Sam dating or talking to each other on that anonymous app for a whole season?
I didn't like that.
That weared very thin. Yeah, I was not into that.
I think it went on for too long.
I will say, like, even just the idea of that app, I'm like, that's dangerous as fuck. Like, no ages. Like, you don't know who's talking to who.
Yeah, and even, like, they played it for too long where, if I remember correctly, they were playing it like it was going to be a surprise to the audience, right? But I caught on very quickly that it was them talking to each other, and, like, even the fact that after they find out, they try and pursue it, but it's just so inappropriate. Like, even despite the age difference, the fact that she's, you know, his boss, and I don't know, I didn't like it at all. But I did like, I think also the same season, Sam's arc with the restaurant.
Yeah.
Right? I like that a lot, him starting up the restaurant and the whole team gathering there and stuff. But yeah, his other arc with Rebecca that season,
that was pretty
didn't really
bad.
hit for me.
Yeah, the restaurant was after. The restaurant was a breakup.
Oh yeah, so I guess we wouldn't have gotten the restaurant without that one, right?
Well, it was when, like, that one guy, Edwin Akufu,
Sam Richardson is the best.
Richardson.
I adore Sam Richardson.
But it was because he felt homesick when Sam Richardson, like, offered to, like, sign him on that African league, and he said no. Like, the restaurant was his way to stay connected to.
Oh yeah, okay.
To back home.
So we could have still had that.
Yeah.
Even without the Rebecca thing.
Well, he did, because there was a whole back and forth where he had to decide, and Rebecca's like, don't go, and Sam was like, okay, I'm not, but it's because it's what's best for like me and my story arc. I think he literally said something like that. So I think it was also maybe a little bit breakup related. I don't know, but I did love it. It was really sad when it got like ruined, but it was nice to see the team come back together to fix it.
That was a nice moment.
Definitely made me cry.
Yeah, the actual dating arc was like, that was like a Three's Company episode. But like, imagine a Three's Company episode but for like an entire season of television where it's like, oh, who am I actually talking to right now? That was rough. I'm glad better things followed for Sam, because Sam deserves better than that arc. That was painful.
But especially there was the episode where like her mother was there when Sam was there, and so she found out, and then it came out at like her father's funeral. That, like, I was like, that's crazy.
Very weird choice. Very weird choice for sure.
Yeah, and what about Ted's wife dating their couples therapist?
Okay,
that's like fucked, right?
Listen,
that's
that
so
to me
fucked.
Was like, that felt very passive aggressive. Jason Sudeikis being like, we need to put something fucked up that his ex-wife does in the show, and everyone in the writer's room was like, whoa, Jason, whoa, because that is like, that is a very pointed stance, like a very deliberate.
I agree, and also I'm gonna add, I would have preferred if we never saw his wife and kid at all ever in the series. Also, partially because I think they were the worst two actors in the whole show, especially the kid. I have to say, like, it was really bad. But even just because they only show up a couple times, I think they could have easily been, or even in the finale, like, that's the first time we see them. I think that could have been something cool to do. Like, when he finally goes home.
Well, even he was, like, FaceTiming them, and I was like, that's enough. You could, or even just, like, he could mention that he had FaceTimed his son. I don't think we needed to see it.
Yeah, and I think it would have helped with, like, his portraying his detachment. Like, if we had never seen them, it would have helped us get into his head a little bit more. And also because, like, again, the acting from them could have been better. But also, just talking about that arc of her dating the guy, it felt similar to me with the Sam and Rebecca thing, like just an inappropriate dating situation. So didn't really like that one either.
Yeah.
But
it didn't take up too much time, I guess, in the season, right?
Thankfully, it wasn't too much. It could have been worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there are a lot of super inappropriate relationships. Like, even, like, Keely dating Jack was super, like, this person's funding your shit. You shouldn't be fucking them at all. But
it could have been somebody dating a pop star, His ex-wife could have been dating a pop star that's way too young.
That's what I was, like, when you were like, oh, maybe it's a fuck you to his ex-wife, I'm like, then that should have been the plot.
I feel like the
really
stance...
tell us.
The stance...
Tell us how you feel.
Maybe that's why there's so many inappropriate relationships in the show, is he's like, damn, it's pretty crazy that my ex-wife is dating Harry Styles, and then he just had to, like, put in a bunch of relationships with people dating people way younger than them and stuff. I don't know. Maybe that's why. But, yeah, that, either way, it's just odd.
Okay, and then Keely hiring Shandy.
Oh.
No,
also
that
made
was
no
so
sense,
stupid.
right?
That was so dumb.
Yeah.
Like, she had one good idea, and you're like, okay, work for me for this brand new company that I just built, where I have already spent 3 seasons proving I am smart and capable. I'm gonna hire this idiot.
Agreed.
Yeah, hated that.
Luckily that was a lot smaller of an arc than even the previous two, so.
Yeah, like, I'm happy that they had her realize that quickly, because if not, I would have been pissed. And then Rebecca seeing a psychic. How did we feel about the psychic arc?
About her having a baby, right?
That everything... Yeah, it was like, you're gonna have a baby, you're gonna have a green matchbook, you're gonna meet a man or something like that.
So that ties into the Sam thing.
We were just waiting for all of those things through the season.
For that reason, I didn't really like that one either, because it's related to her dating Sam, right? Like, he was the man that she ended up...
He gave her the green matchbook, and so she thought maybe it
from
meant
his restaurant,
them getting together again, but, like, nothing beyond that really happened.
Yeah, and I recall it not really going anywhere in the end, right? Or am I forgetting? Like, she never has a baby.
Like... Well, it was interesting because obviously they're like, you will have a child. And so she went to a fertility clinic and they're like, you can't have a child. The tests say it's not happening. But the man that she met on the boat has a child. So in theory, they like meet each other at the airport, like at the very, very, very end of the show. And so in theory, if they end up together, she will be a stepmother to this child.
Oh,
So she
yeah.
doesn't-
Okay,
so
I guess
she
that's
gets
true.
a kid, technically.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
mind like the psychic aspect of it because again, I like when shows do weird stuff like that where it's just like, hey, psychics are real in the show, or like Santa's real in the show. I think that stuff is very fun. So I like when shows do weird shit. But I don't know. I just have Gilmore Girls PTSD about like women in shows as the seasons go on needing to have a plot about wanting to have a kid. Like that just it's like it's so fucking lazy, and it happens in like every show. It's like, do we have anything left interesting for this character to do? Nah? Alright, let's introduce the idea that maybe they'll have a kid or not, and deal with the ramifications of it one way or another of if she can't have a kid. Like, alright. I mean, there was nothing about the first 2 seasons that really made me think that this was like in any way, or I guess this is in season 2, right?
It was season 3.
Was it?
Well, there's definitely nothing in season 1 that like sets that theming up in any way, shape, or form. So it is a little bit, that part of it is a little bit like, I please, just something else. Just write something else for the psychic to predict.
Yeah.
You know, we can do something else. But in theory, I like it. Some of the execution of it, like we've talked about with everything on this show. In theory, yeah. But yeah, some of the execution of it's a little bit wonky. I have a very interesting story about why I was so goddamn reluctant to ever watch this show, and I was very mad at the show for a long time, passive aggressively mad, and I need before I watched it. I need you to know why, because like 15 years ago, when I was a young child, maybe 11 or 12 years old or something like that. I don't know. Is that math? No, it doesn't. That's fine. Whatever. When I was 11 or 12 years old, my uncle handed me this book by a very famous author named John Grisham, who has written a bunch of stuff, normally like political thrillers, but sometimes he writes like comedy novels. And this book that he wrote is called Playing for Pizza. And the plot of this book, published 20 years ago, is an American...
Doesn't he write books for like adults?
Well, no, he writes like, typically he writes like spy thrillers. Yeah, it wasn't like a kid's book, but it was just like a novel. Like it was like a short, like novella, whatever. It was like couple hundred pages. And I was really into reading back then. It was my reading era. And so anyway, the book's called Playing for Pizza, and it's about a American football coach who has to go to Italy to coach a soccer team in Italy, and all the hijinks and shenanigans that he ensues coaching a soccer team in Italy. And so when I saw like trailers and stuff about Ted Lasso, I was like, oh, how cool. Like this is like a spiritual kind of like adaptation of that show of like an American football coach that has to go to Europe and deal with like the culture clash of this different sport and being in Europe and stuff. And so I started looking around, and I have found absolutely no evidence, absolutely no acknowledgement from any creator involved with Ted Lasso as to like the fact that this book that has the exact same plot exists and has existed for like 20 years. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that sure, maybe it's just a coincidence, but it is like pretty hyper specific, like that it's like very specifically an American football coach that then like goes to coach a soccer team in like a European country, and like the shenanigans that ensue from there in terms of like dealing with the locals and people not liking him and et cetera, et cetera. It's like a lot of similar plot elements. And so because there was no acknowledgement, I was like, you know what? Fuck this Ted Lasso show. I'm not watching it. And yeah, you know, I didn't have, my convictions weren't that strong. So I did end up watching it, and it's good. But that did piss me off for a while, because I was like, I know Jason Sudeikis. I know that you fucking read this book, and I understand that it's legally distinct enough for you to not have to acknowledge it, but don't fuck with me.
But actually, there was also a person who did something very similar in real life. His name is Terry Smith, and he is an American who like played and coached American football and baseball. And at some point in his life, he took over Chester City as head coach.
Interesting.
So he did
Ted Lasso
and Playing for Pizza. He did that IRL.
Yeah, this is interesting.
I don't know what came first in terms of chicken and the egg, Playing for Pizza or Terry Smith.
Very interesting.
I don't know. But they also don't really say that it's based on Terry Smith either, so.
Terry Smith is a very generic American name also. Just like Ted Lasso.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Ted Lasso. The Lasso, I think, makes it pretty.
Yeah.
distinct.
Or sorry, not generic, but like stereotypical,
hyper-American.
like
Yeah.
Lasso, like very country.
Yeah.
I did find a few miscellaneous points that I might as well bring up now that haven't come up naturally, or that I just want to elaborate on. They're just kind of random all over the place, but I'll just reinforce that I really liked the fact that Ted was able to, in winning over the team, sort of earn his way back home, and then he does return home at the end to, actually spend real time with his child, even though he doesn't necessarily have to like get back together with his ex-wife. Like that's his victory. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, but they also made it seem like they might get back together, which I found very interesting.
It is like up in the air, but I prefer to think of it that they don't, like he's past it.
Me too.
And I like that they left it, that it could go both ways. But I do just want to mention this being the shortest show out of the 3 selection series, and like by far the most modern. I think I had higher expectations for it than like any of the 3, which also maybe contributed to the issues that I've already discussed in our discussion. Like maybe these things, I feel like some of them I only have such big a problem with it because with a 12 episode structure or prestige era TV show, like there's less room for error for these kind of things. Like just for example, the couple of filler episodes in season 2, I think in this day and age a streaming show shouldn't have filler episodes. Like those come from the time where you're airing every week. Sometimes you need to fill a week because you're on a network TV show, like, and that just doesn't really have a place for me. So that's why I had such a problem with the Christmas episode and the Beard episode, just as an example. But
Fair.
That being said, like speaking to the length, I'm happy with the length. I think, although we were talking about how season 3 felt packed and a little bit bloated and maybe rushed, maybe could have used, if anything, one more season, and it still wouldn't have been too much. But 3 seasons it adds to the rewatchability. And like I said at the beginning, I wouldn't rule it out for revisiting the show. Although, like, I wouldn't pay for Apple TV Plus again, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
So that's just a couple miscellaneous things I had in my notes wanted to bring up.
I just have one last miscellaneous thought, because we haven't touched on it too much, but related to the ending in particular, and like specifically Ted's ending, right? And I talked about season 3 not being my favorite, or like not liking, or not fully connecting with like his arc in season 3 as well. But I feel like, and it's for all the reasons we've talked about, it's because partially because like I don't necessarily buy the relationship with this kid, which I don't want to shit on a child actor, but like, maybe that's somewhat related. Maybe if like their acting chemistry was better, that would have come across a little bit more. But then also just like his own like personal mantras and philosophies. I think because the therapy stuff doesn't necessarily hit as hard, because we don't get some of those bigger moments with some of the key characters like Rebecca or Nate that really feel like they're coming through properly. Like at the end of the show, like it conceptually, but when I think about like endings of other shows or like big emotional moments that end seasons of other shows, even I just didn't have the like emotional reaction to it, where I was like, yeah, of course, like this is the ending and it's very nice, and I can sit here and say like this is a very nice, good ending, but it didn't like pull on my heartstrings the way that I would want like this positive dad character going home to coach his kid's soccer team. Like I would want that ending to pull on my heartstrings a bit more, and for whatever reason, of whatever small execution problems along the way, when that ending did happen, I was like, yeah, like it makes sense and it's like objectively a good ending. But if it was a little bit, if the dials were turned a little bit more properly in a few other areas, I feel like that could have been like a phenomenal heartstring pulling, like one of my favorite endings. And it just wasn't. It was just like, yeah, that's good. And then it ended, and I was like, cool, and I moved on with my life, and I haven't really, it hasn't stuck with me. I haven't thought about it since. Like, it happened.
I mean, you are coaching.
I am, but the thing is, like, no, well, but and as I said, like, I was something I wanted to do anyway, and then I was watching the show, and I was like, okay, I'll do it.
That's what you
Sure,
think.
Sure, Marco, sure.
But no, it didn't. It just I wanted that to hit harder and like resonate with me harder, and it just didn't. So it's fine. It happens. You know, what are you gonna do? That's okay.
Yeah, and I have no more notes. I mean, I have tons of notes, but they're my point form notes of me summarizing all the episodes to jog my memory, so I'm not going to read those. But I do have a few fun facts that maybe you don't know that I'll just share. I don't know if you noticed, Zach Braff directed season 1, episode 2. I thought very randomly, but also the co-creator of the show is Bill Lawrence, who was the creator of Scrubs. So I was like, oh, Bill Lawrence probably asked him to do it. But apparently the internet was just like, no, he was just in, like, England, so
yeah,
he just came and did it. I'm sure that connection is, like, why they reached out, but it is very funny that they're just like, nah, he was around, so he did it. And, you know, I guess now he directs movies, so hopefully this was good practice for him, although I heard that movie was just fine.
It wasn't. It was bad.
Okay, or bad, because I heard it from you, so I was trying to be more positive about it, but now we're just shitting on Zach Braff, I guess.
At the time, I was like, yeah, this is fine, but as some time has passed, like, nah, it was pretty bad. It was not great.
Is it that one that we were talking about? We brought it up before. That feels like a movie within
Yes,
a movie.
yeah, where it's just like the plot is so like silly and like fake and ridiculous and
Isn't it about
it's like
someone's like
Florence
husband dying? What do you mean
Pugh's
silly?
fiance dies, but then she has to like spend time with fucking this other person who's like probably in his family or something. It's like a really contrived, 100% like movie within a movie type thing where you're like, oh, these big actors and this big director in a movie together, and like it's just fucking the most like bullshit, like fake emotional. Like you're supposed to feel emotional and you watch it and you don't resonate with any of it. That's what it is, which I feel bad about because I know like Zach Braff wrote it because his friend died.
Fair.
And so I'm sure for him this is a very personal movie, but
Yeah.
it literally was, I was so disconnected the entire time watching it. So, but anyway, topic for another day.
Okay, also, the first season of this show got 20 nominations at the Emmys, which is the most a freshman comedy
Very cool.
has ever been nominated at the
Wow.
Emmys.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Also, I was
Yeah.
2020, so I'm sure it was also a slow year. But also, everyone did love this show, so I get it. And the performances were a lot of those nominations, and I think they
That
were
checks
all
out.
super well deserved.
That checks out.
Yeah. And my last fun fact is that apparently, like, the cookies that Ted bakes for Rebecca, the props department was like, she probably won't really eat that many. Like, we're not going to make them good. Apparently, they tasted like ass. And so Hannah Waddingham
That's
was
so
like, that was
funny.
the best acting of my whole life. To eat and enjoy those cookies.
Why wouldn't they just buy regular cookies? That's so stupid.
I don't know. You can get shortbread. And even I'm sure making shortbread
It would
is not
probably be
that
harder
tough.
to make it taste bad.
But anyway, I don't know. I don't work in props. But look, also, you work for Apple. Buy some
I
shortbread.
know. God, I hate Apple so much.
That's the thing.
I'm sure
like,
you
how much
have
could it
prop
possibly
budget
cost
for
to buy
cookies.
A few boxes of cookies over the span of the series. Like, it's not that many fucking cookies.
Yeah, hopefully they got better by the end. But when she like eats them for the first time and is like freaking
That's
out
so
over
funny.
them, apparently they were horrible. But that was it. Those are all my notes.
Nice. We did it.
Do you believe that this is a good show?
Is this our recommendation section?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe that this is a good show. I feel like it has, its number of missteps that we've talked about. But would I recommend it? I think it's still worth a recommend. I think it's, it's a very easy watch, and it's very funny at times, and not just funny. Like, I wouldn't call this a sitcom. I wouldn't say put it on if you're looking for a laugh. I think the laughs are just like,
Yeah.
they come with it. But I do feel the plot and characters are engaging enough. And just to reiterate one more time, like, I don't care about sports, and I still was invested in the plot because the characters hit hard enough. So yes, I believe it's worth a
Nice.
recommend.
I would say I think at its core, what this show does best is like really capture what the aspects of sports that like anybody can get into, the way that like whether it's going to see a live sporting event or if your country's competing in something and competing at the Olympics, whatever. Those moments where like even people who don't care about sports can like find that human connection. I think like that runs through this entire show. So yeah, regardless of whether or not you are interested in the particulars, I think that human connection is there and it is worth a watch. I would say, I think to your point, Dan, about like it doesn't really feel like a sitcom, even if it's like a comedy. I think pretty much every pitfall I have with the show is true of like so much prestige television. Like I think prestige television, once everything's prestige television, then nothing's prestige television, you know? Like we've just entered this era of like, yeah, I'm glad everything looks hyper HD and great and everything is a 12 episode series and whatever, but like, I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily serve the content.
Subject
yeah
matter.
It's like and I think those pitfalls are probably here as well. Some of the pitfalls we've talked about probably come from the fact that it's prestige television, which is very inverse to what we talked about with Lost, where I was like, that should have been prestige television, but you know, it's unfortunate. This is the time that we're in. Everything's going to be that now. But yeah, I mean, if you like good TV, this is good TV, and I also believe that you should watch this show.
And obviously, because it's my selection, I also definitely believe you should watch the show, especially if you're just looking for something like lighthearted. I also agree, not a sitcom. I don't know that I was like LOLing. I don't know that they were really writing it to have like jokes that give you that reaction. There was a lot in it that was humorous and funny, and so you will be entertained. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good watch to raise your spirits and like make you think for a moment that humanity is good. It definitely worked for that. But then it ends and, you know, you like walk down the street and people can be assholes, but that's fine. While you're in it, you think that everyone's great, and that's fun to escape to sometimes. So definitely recommend.
I like that implies that like you watch this whole thing in one sitting and then go outside when you're done and walk on the street and realize you're back in the real world.
Damn, it's not real. Yeah, I mean, honestly, probably when I was watching it, I don't like remember how quickly I watched it. I know I was watching the last season like live every week when the episodes came out, but I probably like binged the first and second season. Yeah. So I kind of did.
I watched it pretty quickly when I was watching it for this, and it is, you know, it's a short show, so.
Cool. Well, thanks for talking about Ted Lasso. We'll be back again
sometime this year.
Sooner than the last break. For sure. Yeah. To talk about Marco's selection to round out the series finally.
You know what's so funny is, like, because we were supposed to film all this at Christmas, I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna have time to watch my show, but like I definitely would have had time to just watch my show between now and then, like rewatch it, and I still haven't. Yeah. But maybe I will. I don't know. Maybe I do. Yeah.
You might still have time. Start now.
I've had time since we recorded Lost to now to rewatch all of Lost without skipping any episodes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe I'll rewatch my show before we talk about it, or maybe I'll just watch like key episodes from every season.
We'll be back to talk about. Are we saying what it is?
Sure.
We'll be back to talk about The West Wing.
Seasons 1 to 4.
At some point.
This one's been a long time coming.
It's been talked about and referenced so much, and we'll finally delve into it.
I'm so excited. Carol, did you finish it yet?
No, I actually started watching season 4 today, or yesterday. So I think I'm on episode, 4.
Oh, so I definitely have time to watch at least the first couple.
Yeah, well, now I'm more committed to watching it again, so, because I finished all my other things. Finished The Bear and whatnot.
Nice. I was very excited by Dan's reaction to the last episode of season 4. Let's just say...
Yeah.
I can't wait to talk about it.
Let's just say nothing.
I can't wait to talk about it. That's all. Let's just say that.
Great. Well, that's coming soon-ish. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks guys.
Everyone.
Thanks again for listening to the Feature Length Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you liked this video or audio. Give us a rating and review. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes of this podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video, or follow the podcast on Spotify. If you want to connect with us directly, you can follow us on Instagram at featurelengthpodcast, or even send us an email at featurelengthpodcast@gmail.com. Catch you on the flip side.